second bit, and again, power inquiry, which is my bête noire of the moment. It used to be, I'll get up in the morning, how do you get yourself fired up? Now you could be all young, looked at you, all sort of young and energetic. You probably won't need this, but I need sort of coffee, several cups of coffee in the morning. And my trick always used to be to read the letters page of The Guardian, which would get me so fired up, so furious, that sort of moronic state that I'd be ready to face the day. And as I got older, my need for more and more coffee has sort of increased. And The Guardian letters page doesn't do it. It's like a sort of junkie who has to keep getting more. The Guardian letters page just doesn't cut it anymore. The power inquiry wheel, I can just open a page at random, there'll be some sort of moronic sentence which will get me really angry, and sending off furious emails. Have you read page 17? It's rubbish. And then you have this section in there about how MPs these days are very distant from the electorate. There's a bit, I don't know if any of you watched The Lamentable Mrs. Pritchard, as it should be called, on television last week and the week before, which was a sort of BBC version of Politics for Morons. And in it, there was this bit where Jane Horrocks, who I do like, but I've never shouted so many obscenities at Jane Horrocks. The people downstairs kept saying, keep it quiet up there. Why are you being so rude? As I was just telling her to shut up for all the violence. And she had this bit about how British politicians these days were just so distant from the electorate. And this again is just hooey. Go back to the 1950s. Go back to the 1950s. British MPs never went anywhere near their constituency. I mean, they were Westminster based, and they would travel to the constituency once every 4 months, sometimes once a year. People who went once a month or once every 2 years were considered to be really constituency focused. They would get a name as a really good constituency MP. There's hardly any correspondence from the constituency to them. That it was, they just ignored. Hardly any of them lived. I mean, the idea of living in the constituency must be mad. There were some Labour MPs who lived in Switzerland during the 1950s. And would commute to London for the business and then go back to Switzerland. These days, all of that's changed. I mean, almost all MPs now either live in or extremely near a constituency. A lot of them spend sometimes at least half, sometimes more than half the week in the constituency. But the changes to parliamentary hours recently, which now mean most of the business is Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, meaning they're spending Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday in the constituency. More than half the week, even when they're at Westminster. That's what they're doing for a lot of their time as constituency post. A level of correspondence now to the constituency which would have been unimaginable 30 or 40 years ago. So this idea, somehow, that MPs now are distant, whereas once they used to be right embedded in the community, is just nonsense. If anything, one of the paradoxes which I'm quite interested in is how, as they've actually become more like us socially, we've become less enamoured with them. When they were there was a sort of sense of noblesse oblige and lots of sort of Tories who went to Eton, we seem to think that was great. Now that there's lots of people who worked as teachers, we think they're rubbish. Now that's a question of sort of how we view society, which I will just leave unanswered, and you can contemplate it. But it's definitely happened. The bit that I'm most interested in, because of what I work on mainly, which is backbench rebellions, is this idea. It was implicit in power inquiry, it's implicit in effort, it's implicit in Roy Hattersley's comments. It was implicit the other week in an article in the Telegraph, which said nobody rebels anymore. It is also simply not true that MPs these days are acquiescent and willing to do the bidding of the whips in a way they weren't before. I'll throw this to you as a rhetorical question, but it's a rhetorical question you can't answer, which is the only reason I'm throwing it open. If at some point someone trips me up on this, I shall storm out a hissy fit. So can you name me any parliament since the war where the government has enjoyed a majority of at least 60, and that government has been defeated 4 times in its first year in the House of Commons? And the answer is you can't. And the reason you can't is because there hasn't been such an occasion. There have also, as well as 4 defeats in the last year, been some embarrassing free votes, some astonishing retreats on policy, and we're going to see this week, tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, you'll see a series of concessions from the government over the Companies Bill in order to head off the backbench rebellion. Backbench rebellions at the moment are running at one rebellion in 27% of the votes. So roughly 1 rebellion every 4 votes. That is a higher rate for the first session than any first session since the war, It is a higher rate, for example, than the Major government in 92 to 93, when John Major had so much trouble getting Maastricht through the House of Commons. Backbench rebellion is currently running at a higher level than then. You've also seen other victories by single figures. We've seen other victories only achieved with the support of the Conservatives. It is difficult, it seems to me, to argue that somehow at the moment backbenchers are incredibly weak and feeble, but once they were so strong and powerful. And go and compare this again to the 1950s. In the 1950s, there were 2 sessions, 2 whole years, during which not a single government MP rebelled against their whip once. Complete and utter cohesion on the government benches for 2 whole years in the 50s. A sort of level of discipline. Now, today's whips, I mean, some people think whips have sold their souls, but if they haven't sold their souls, they'd sell them for that, I'll tell you. The thought that you could get Bob Marshall Andrews, who's coming up here next week, I mean, he can't last more than a couple of weeks without voting against the whip. In the 50s, the entire governing party didn't rebel against the whip for 2 years. I mean, quite a remarkable state of affairs compared to today. Don't give me any of this rubbish about how in the 50s Parliament was full of these independent MPs, not full of career politicians. They were too gutless. Now we've got these career politicians. They won't do what their constituents want. They'll just do what the whips. It's completely the opposite. As Parliament's become more full of career politicians, it's become more assertive, not less assertive.